All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Justin Conley. I will be the presiding judge. Just to let you know a little bit about me, I work at the Public Defender's Office. I have for 3 years now, so I do have a little bit of trial experience. And I'm excited. This is my first time doing it, so I'm very excited. I need to confirm that if video recorders are present and being used, that both teams have approved the taping of the round. So is there anyone, if there is anyone who is recording who has not been approved by both teams, please stop doing that. The Colorado Bar Association may be, or likely will be, taking photographs of the competition during the round. And team participation in the state tournament grants automatic permission for the use of these photos by the Colorado Bar Association. If there is anyone in the gallery who is connected with the teams and not competing, like student members, coaches of other schools, or of the same school but a different team, please leave the courtroom. Is there anyone who needs to leave? All right. Just a reminder that no recesses will be allowed, with the exception of those granted for a health emergency. If there is a recess necessary for a health emergency, please let me know. Otherwise, no recesses, especially not between the end of witness examination and the beginning of closing arguments. To the scoring panelists, is there any reason you may have to be biased in judging either team?
No.
Nope.
Okay. Teams and coaches, if there are any disputes rising out of the competition, that the dispute must be reported in accordance with the competition rules. Teams, your compliance with time requirements are going to be considered in scoring individual performances. And I think with that, I'm going to ask each team to introduce the participating team members, and I suppose we can start with the prosecution.
Good morning, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Jacob Durso, and today I will be delivering the opening statement on behalf of the prosecution. I will be conducting the direct examination of Jordan Markowitz as well as the cross-examination of Blake Van Owen.
Good morning, Your Honor, people of the jury and opposing counsel. I am Brianna Flores Chavez, and I will be doing the direct examination of Kyle Kozak and the cross-examination of Taylor Perkins.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Marian Damtu, and today I will be conducting the direct examination of Alex Fuentes, the cross-examination of Avery Becker, and I will also be delivering the closing statement on behalf of the prosecution. At this time, may our witnesses now introduce themselves?
They may.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Ella Thomas, and today I am Alex Fuentes.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Milo Lamas, and today I am Kyle Kozak.
Good morning, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. My name is Kate Snaringer, and today I am Jordan Markowitz.
Okay, if that wraps up the defense or the prosecution, I think the defense team can introduce themselves.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury and the opposing counsel. I am Ming Song. I will be delivering the opening statement, the direct examination of Blake Van.
Miss Song, you cut out toward the end of that. So you could just repeat yourself, please. Right now you're muted.
Sorry, did I cut out?
You cut out there toward the end, yeah.
Okay, should I restart or give the end?
You can go ahead and restart, yes.
Okay. Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury and the opposing counsel. I am Ming Song. I will be delivering the opening statement, the direct examination of Professor Blake Van Owen, and the cross-examination of Detective Jordan Markowitz.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Tony Adams, and today I will be performing the direct examination of Taylor Perkins and the cross-examination of Kyle Kuzak.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury, and opposing counsel. Today I will be delivering the closing argument, direct questioning Avery Becker, and crossing Alex Fuentes. Your Honor, at this time, the defense requests that our witnesses be allowed to introduce themselves.
They may.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Robert Zimian, and I am Blake Van Owen.
Good morning, Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury. My name is Sofia Chishlevich, and I am Taylor Perkins.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Alex Holland, and today I am Avery Becker.
All right, I think that's everyone who's introduced themselves. Thank you. At this point, I'm going to swear in the team members. So if you could turn on your video and raise your right hand. Team members, do you promise that the presentation you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition? If so, please say I do. All right.
I do.
Witnesses, could you please turn on your video and raise your right hands? Witnesses, do you promise that the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to your witness statements, and that you will not add material facts or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial competition? If so, please say I do. Okay. I'm going to swear in the gallery members. Do we have any? If so, please turn on your video and raise your right hand. Gallery members, including teacher and attorney coaches, family members and friends, please raise your right hands. Do you promise to represent yourself as positive role models and to behave in a manner that exemplifies ethical and professional sportsmanship during and after this mock trial round? If so, please say I do.
I do.
And finally, scoring panelists, could you please raise your right hands? Do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of the mock trial competition? If so, please say I do.
I do.
I do.
Okay. All right, with that, are we ready to begin the trial? All right, are there any preliminary matters that we need to take up?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, please continue.
Your Honor, we have 5 preliminary matters. For each of them, we ask for the court's instruction on behalf of both the prosecution and the defense. If at any time the court cannot see or hear a lawyer who is speaking, a witness who is testifying, or an exhibit being displayed, we ask for the court to interrupt so the problem can be resolved.
Okay, we can do that. And the same would go for the panelists, the jury. If you have that issue, please unmute yourself and interrupt.
If technical difficulties stop the trial for more than 20 to 30 seconds, we ask the court to direct the timers to stop the clock until the trial can proceed.
That's granted to both sides.
When the prosecution has a witness identify the defendant, may we ask that the defendant turn on his or her camera for the purpose of identification?
Both sides may do that, yes.
Under Competition Rule 7.4, a team may screen share an exhibit when seeking admission to the exhibit. The rule provides that a screen shared exhibit will be deemed not to be shown to the jury unless admitted in evidence. How would the court like teams to proceed when seeking admissions to an exhibit?
When you're seeking admission for an exhibit, you can do the screen sharing. It will be deemed constructively not published or admitted to the jury until the proper foundation and request has been made. And so I suppose if it is admitted, then it will be formally published and admitted. So long as it is not admitted, it will not, but you can use the screen sharing function.
Thanks. Under Competition Rules 7.4 and 4.7, a team may use Zoom annotation features to mark exhibits electronically. Once an exhibit is admitted, would the court like us to ask permission to mark the exhibit?
Yes, please, both sides request permission to mark the exhibit.
Also, we ask that any remaining time in closing statements be allocated for a rebuttal, and previously admitted exhibits can be used in defense. Or, I apologize, in closing statements.
That's granted to. Anything else?
No, that is all.
Okay, defense.
Yes, Your Honor. We ask to enter the stipulated facts on page 4 of the case problem.
Any stipulations will be entered as stipulations, although if you need to refer to them throughout the trial, please provide the necessary detail to make sure it makes sense to the jury.
Yes, Your Honor. We also ask for permission to confer with co-counsel either through the Zoom private chat or through other means of communication like text messaging. We will notify you before communicating with one another.
I'll take that on a case-by-case basis, I suppose. So if the need arises, please just notify.
Yes, Your Honor. We also ask that exhibits, once they have been entered, will be constructively published to the jury, but will just remain on the screen.
Yes, that's granted.
That's all, Your Honor.
If there's nothing else, I think we are ready to start with opening statements. Would the prosecution like to give an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
Desperation, location, confrontation. Avery Becker was really good at mock trial, award-winning good. Today you will hear that Becker, a participant in Colorado High School's mock trial team, became extremely angry at the victim, mock trial coach Mackenzie Brackman, after being first kicked off the mock trials A team and in turn the mock trial team as a whole. Avery Becker was so angry and desperate to get revenge on Brackman that even after vandalizing the coach's beloved vehicle, Becker yearned to get back at this victim. The evidence will show that in early March 2020, Avery Becker told her mom that she would get back at Coach Brackman if, and I quote, "it is the last thing I do." You will hear today that on March 6th, 2020, Avery does just that, unlawfully entering Brackman's residence, and in the midst of vandalizing said residence, Becker is surprised by Brackman himself, and in the following confusion, hastily proceeds to stab the victim and leave him in the open doorway of his own home. The defendant today is charged with both second-degree burglary and first-degree felony murder. To prove burglary, we will show you that Avery Becker intentionally entered Coach Brackman's home with the intent of damaging property. To prove felony murder, we will show you that during this burglary, Coach Brackman died. The burden of proof is upon the prosecution to prove to the satisfaction of the jury beyond a reasonable doubt the existence of all elements necessary to constitute the crime charged. We will meet this burden of proof today because we will show you, first, the desperation of the defendant to get revenge on Coach Brackman. Second, the confrontation between the defendant and the victim in which the crime occurred. And finally, prove that Avery Becker was at the location of the crime at the time of the crime on the day of the crime. Desperation. Today, you will hear from fellow and former student and mock trial team member at Colorado High School, Alex Fuentes. Alex will testify to the rocky and spiraling relationship between Avery Becker and the victim, Mackenzie Brackman. Fuentes will further testify through numerous text exchanges just how desperate Avery was to get back at Brackman at any cost. Confrontation. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today we will show you the savage confrontation between the defendant and the victim at the victim's residence from crime scene reconstruction expert Kyle Kuzak. You will hear how this burglary gone wrong resulted in the death of a human being and how numerous pieces of evidence were found at the scene of the crime linking the defendant as the murderer. Most notably, a Ring doorbell video in which the intruder matches the exact same height and build as the defendant. Location. Finally, you will hear from detective and expert in cell phone data, Jordan Markowitz. Markowitz will definitively place the defendant at the scene of the crime using cell phone data from Avery Becker's phone. You will hear how at the date and time of the crime, the defendant's phone was cited at being in the vicinity of the very house where the defendant was killed. At the end of the trial, my co-counsel, Maren Damtu, will stand before you and remind you of the defendant's desperation, her confrontation with the victim, and the evidence that shows the defendant's location at the time of the murder. She will ask you, the jury, to find the defendant, Avery Becker, guilty of second-degree burglary and first-degree felony murder. That is all.
Thank you. Would the defense like to give an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please do.
May it please the court, Your Honor, members of the jury, and the opposing counsel. My name is Ming Song, and along with co-counsel Tony Adams and Reed Benfield, I am here on the behalf of the defendant, Avery Becker. Avery has been unfairly and unreasonably accused of heinous crimes. Members of the jury, this is a case of rushed investigations. When crime scene photos were lost, the investigation was rushed. When the police failed to investigate an alternate suspect, the investigation was rushed. And when detectives failed to authenticate what little amount of evidence they have, the investigation was rushed. Members of the jury, because of the prosecution's rushed investigations, what could have been justice for Coach Mackenzie Brackman has now turned into the weight of an accusation on an innocent person's back. On Friday, the 6th of March in the year of 2020, Coach Mackenzie Brackman was found dead in his house. The defendant, Avery Becker, stands here today falsely accused of that murder. The evidence both will fail in placing Avery Becker at the home of the victim, and it will fail in proving that Avery is guilty of any crimes. Your Honor and members of the jury, today you will hear from 3 witnesses from the defense. Professor Blake Van Owen, Taylor Perkins, and Avery Becker herself will all testify to Avery's innocence. The first witness of 3, Professor Blake Van Owen, will give you his unbiased reasoning and expert opinion about this case. Professor Blake Van Owen, who is a professor, a former police officer, and a private investigator will testify to three main cracks in the prosecution's argument. One, that the prosecution lost evidence because of their rushed investigation. Two, that there is an alternate suspect, Blair Rollins, whom the police failed to investigate in any way as a result of their rushed investigation. And three, that because they lack sound evidence, the prosecution's witnesses rely heavily on their own rushed conclusions. The next of three witnesses, Taylor Perkins, was with Avery Becker on Friday, March 6th. Taylor Perkins will take the stand and testify that Avery was never at the scene of the crime, not that day nor any other day. And finally, as the last witness for the defense, you will hear from Avery Becker, a victim of a rushed investigation. Avery will take the stand to testify about the series of misunderstandings that led to these accusations. She will also testify that she was never at the scene of the crime. Members of the jury, you will also hear from three witnesses from the prosecution. Be aware of their bias and understand that their work only further unveils their rushed investigations. You will hear from the prosecution, one jealous student, two careless detectives who combined make three utterly incompetent witnesses. Members of the jury, remember that this is a case of a rushed investigation. Remember that the evidence, or the lack thereof, will give you reasonable doubt about the prosecution's conclusions. And lastly, remember that any defendant is innocent unless proven otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Song. Would the prosecution like to call any witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution would like to call Alex Fuentes to the stand.
You may proceed.
Can you introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Alex Fuentes.
And Ms. Fuentes, are you in school?
Yes, I'm a senior at Colorado High School.
Do you happen to know Avery Becker?
Yes, Avery was on the mock trial team with me at CHS.
Did you know Mackenzie Brackman?
Yes, Mr. Brackman was our coach.
Were you ever able to observe them interacting?
Upon many occasions, every time that I had mock trial practice, I watched them interact.
I'd like to move on to your mock trial experience. For the jury who don't know, what is mock trial?
Mock trial is essentially a simulated courtroom where two teams compete against each other, one arguing prosecution, the other defense, and they have to prove their point. Each member on the team has a specific role, whether attorney or witness, and you compete to win that round of the tournament.
What were typically Miss Becker's roles on this team?
Avery was typically an attorney. She actually won several awards for it.
What was it like having Miss Becker as a teammate?
Honestly, it was quite frustrating. She came to practice late and unprepared a lot of the time, which made all of us very nervous.
And what was Coach Brackman's response to this?
Well, Mr. Brackman, from what I observed, was very angry with her coming late to practice and unprepared. He wanted a lawyer to be prepared.
Was there ever any tension on the team that you could observe?
Oh yes, there was much tension, especially between Coach Brackman and Avery, and there was one particular time that kind of blew up in both of their faces.
Could you explain what happened during that time?
Sure. Avery came to practice the most unprepared I've ever seen, and Mr. Brackman finally had enough and ended up demoting her down to the B team.
What happened after Miss Becker was demoted?
well, one of her friends, Taylor Perkins, quit the team, which resulted in her getting her place back on the 18.
Could you explain what happened at the practice after regionals?
Yes, after regionals, Mr. Brackman and Avery got into another argument over the awards that Avery.
I'm sorry, Ms. Fuentes, you seem to have cut out. Ms. Fuentes, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can.
I apologize, you happened to cut out. Could you re-explain what happened at the practice after regionals?
Of course. Mr. Brackman and Avery got into another argument concerning the awards that Avery had received. That it again blew up in both of their faces, and Avery ended up leaving the classroom with a Sharpie in hand, and yeah, she didn't return.
Do you see Ms. Becker leave the room that day?
Yes, she grabbed a Sharpie and left the classroom.
Did Ms. Becker ever return to practices afterwards?
No, she did not.
What was done with that Sharpie?
She vandalized Coach Brackman's car by writing Worst Attorney Award on the hood. It was supposed to be a dramatic remark about how she had won Best Attorney Award.
Were you ever able to talk to Ms. Becker after this incident?
Yes, I talked to her via text several times, and I talked on March 5th, I believe, at the Fry Shack.
Do you recall what was said in those texts that you received?
Yes, I could never forget those.
Do you recall when you received those messages as well?
Yes, it was shortly after she got kicked off the team, but before Coach Brackman was tragically murdered.
Would you recognize a copy of those messages if I showed you one today here in court?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, permission to screen share Exhibit 14.
You may.
Ms. Galgano, could you please? Thank you. Could you please tell us what you were seeing on the screen?
This is a screenshot of the text message chain between myself and Avery Becker.
Are these a fair and accurate copy of the text you sent to the police department?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, at this time, the prosecution moves to admit Exhibit 14 into evidence.
Is there any objection?
Your Honor, I object under Rule 1002 to the admission of Exhibit 14 as an original recording is required in order to prove its content.
Any response?
Your Honor, this does not need an original copy due to it being the Ms. Becker's words, and it is the copy used in the police investigation.
Any response to that?
These copies are the screenshots of the text messages. They are not the original things that were never seen in person by the detective. Therefore, they cannot be used as an original.
I'll overrule the objection. The exhibit is admitted.
Thank you. Ms. Fuentes, what did Ms. Becker begin this conversation about?
She wanted me to talk to Coach Brackman about her potentially coming back onto the team.
And was Ms. Becker ever put back on the team?
No, I talked to Coach Brackman, but unfortunately he was very adamant that she was not to be on the team.
What was your initial response to receiving these messages, Ms. Fuentes?
I wanted to help Avery. She's one of my friends. So I talked to Coach Brackman, as I said, and unfortunately there is nothing I could do for her.
Could you please read aloud, starting from the text of, well, if he's?
Of course. Well, if he's still upset about his car, then he's going to be really upset when he sees what I do to his house. What are you going to do to his house? I'm going to wait until he's at work and break in and trash it. That'll show him. I don't think that's a very good idea.
Is there any part of these texts that particularly concerned you?
Of course, the portion where she mentions breaking in and trashing his house is extremely concerning.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Ms. Fuentes. Would it be all right if I asked you a few questions?
Of course.
Good morning. You attend Colorado High School.
Yes, I'm on the mock trial team there.
You joined mock trial because Avery Becker asked you to.
Yes, she was one of the reasons I joined.
You were friends with Avery Becker.
Yes, I was.
You regularly hang out with Avery at the Fry Shack.
Yes.
On the night of March 5th, you were at the Fry Shack and played on Miss Becker's phone.
That's correct.
After this night, Miss Becker's phone went missing.
Yes.
You took your role on the mock trial team seriously.
Very. It was important to me.
Avery never seemed to try very hard in mock trial.
That's correct. She came unprepared and late to practice a lot of the time.
This bothered you.
Very much so.
You were jealous of the roles that Avery Becker got on the mock trial team.
Well, of course. I worked very hard and she didn't seem to, so I was jealous.
You believe that Avery didn't deserve the Best Attorney Award.
Yes. She made things up on the fly, and that's one of the reasons she earned that award.
So you consider yourself and Becker friends.
Yes, I do.
You submitted screenshots to Detective Markowitz.
Yes, I did.
These screenshots came from the defendant, Becker.
Yes, they did.
These screenshots were never shown to Detective Markowitz in person. Ms. Fuentes, I think you froze. I'm not sure if you can hear me or not at this point.
I'm sorry, Mr. Benfield, I can't hear you. Could you please repeat the question?
Yes, I will gladly repeat the question. These screenshots were not shown to Detective Markowitz in person.
No, I forgot my phone when going to the investigation and offered to bring my phone back in, but he didn't. He said it was not necessary, so I sent him screenshots as he instructed me to do.
You no longer have the phone that these screenshots were sent on.
Yes, the phone wasn't holding a very good charge, so I ended up trading it in for a new one.
You got rid of the phone knowing Becker was going to trial.
Oh, yes, I did.
You no longer have access to the text messages between you and Avery.
Well, I have the screenshots.
Thank you, Your Honor. There are no further questions at this time.
Is there any redirect?
Yes, just a couple. Ms. Fuentes, what did you do when the police asked you to interview with them?
I willingly went, though I forgot my phone at the house. I offered to bring my phone back to the detective, but he said screenshots were only necessary.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Based on that questioning, is there any recross?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, may this witness be excused. Prosecution, do you have any other witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor, at this time, the prosecution would like to call Kyle Kuzak to the stand.
Okay.
Hello, Mr. Kuzak. Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Kyle Kuzak.
And what do you do for a living?
Well, I'm a crime scene reconstruction investigator for the Denver Police Department.
How long have you been working with the Denver Police Department?
3 years.
And how many years of experience do you have?
I have 19 years of experience investigating complex crime scenes. This includes home invasions, burglaries, and other property crimes.
Do you have any certifications as a crime scene reconstruction investigator?
Indeed, I do. I am certified by the state of Colorado.
Your Honor, at this time, we tender this witness as an expert in crime scene reconstruction.
Any objections?
No objections, Your Honor.
All right, this witness will be admitted as an expert.
All right, Mr. Kuzak, what were you assigned to do to this case?
Well, in this case, I was, as my job is, I was assigned to analyze and organize all of the evidence present throughout the case, and then use that to figure out a sequence of events that points towards what happened on the day of March 6th, 2020.
Was there enough evidence to reconstruct these events?
Indeed, there was, yes.
What method did you use for your analysis?
Well, I used the common CSI method, the Bevel and Gardner 7-step methodology.
Do you use findings of other investigators to conclude your research?
Yes, I always do.
What did the police find at the crime scene?
Well, the police found the dead body of Mackenzie Brackman and a bloody knife murder weapon right next to him.
Where was the body found?
The body was found just inside the front door of the Brackman residence.
Would you recognize photos of the dead body and knife if I were to show you them?
Yes, I believe I would.
Your Honor, permission to screen share exhibits 1 and 5.
You may.
Ms. Galgano, can you please screen share? Mr. Kuzak, what are these?
Well, exhibit 1 there on the left is a picture of the victim, Mr. Brackman, face down, dead on the floor.
Mr. Brackman, face down, dead on the floor.
While exhibit 5 on the right there is a picture of the bloody knife found right next to the body of the victim.
Do these pictures accurately reflect the scene as it was found by police?
They do, yes.
They do, yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the prosecution moves to admit exhibits 1 and 5.
Any objection? Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
The exhibits will
Thank you, Ms. Galgano. Sorry. Oh, thank you, Ms. Galgano. You may stop. What else was found at the crime scene?
Well, there were also multiple pieces of evidence that suggested and showed a sign of struggle. This included scuff marks on the floor by the back door, blood splatter, a broken plate, and an overturned chair.
Ma'am, there seems to be
Would you be able to recognize
substantial echo, and it may help if you turn your computer volume down.
Oh, is that better?
I think so. You may proceed.
Would you be able to recognize pictures of such things if I were to show you them?
I believe I would be able to, yes.
Your Honor, permission to screen share exhibits 9 and 18.
You may.
Ms. Galgano, can you please put exhibits 9 and 18 on the screen? All right, Mr. Kozak, what are these?
Well, exhibit 9 there is the broken plate I was talking about. And then exhibit 18 shows those scuff marks by the back door.
Do these pictures accurately reflect the scene as it was found by police?
Yeah, they do.
Your Honor, at this time, the prosecution moves to admit exhibits 9 and 18.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
These exhibits will be.
What do these photos indicate?
And Ms. Flores, do you have multiple members in the same room?
I'm using a speaker for the sound because the Chromebook, the device I'm using right now, the sound isn't loud enough for me to hear you guys, so I have to use a speaker.
Okay. If you have any headphones that you can quickly, that might be helpful. Otherwise, I think we'll.
All right. I moved it a little farther so it might sound better.
Okay. You may proceed.
Mr. Kuzak, what do these photos indicate?
Well, these photos clearly indicate that the victim and the perpetrator have engaged into a struggle.
Was there anything else found at the crime scene?
Indeed, there was. The Brackman residence had a motion-activated security system. This security system was called Ring.
Thank you, Ms. Galgano. You may stop screen sharing. Mr. Kozak, as you had mentioned these videos, were you able to review them?
Yes, the Coach Brackman and his residence had 3 Ring security cameras, and I was able to obtain video sequences from all of them.
Are you familiar with Exhibit 12?
I believe I am, yes.
Has it been altered in any way or form from when they were originally obtained?
To my knowledge, it has not.
Your Honor, permission to play Exhibit 12.
You may.
Ms. Galgano, can you please play it? Mr. Kozak, what does this video show?
Well, this video clearly shows a masked intruder entering through the back door, a sliding door, of the victim's house.
Your Honor, at this time, the prosecution moves to admit Exhibit 12.
Are there any objections?
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 12 is admitted.
Mr. Kozak, what did you conclude with this video?
I concluded that the victim had to have been alerted of the perpetrator's presence and entrance.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I concluded that the victim had been alerted of the perpetrator's presence and entrance into the residence.
Can the perpetrator be identified in these videos?
No, they cannot because they are wearing a hoodie, a mask, gloves, and other full body coverings. But it can be concluded from this video and the other ones that the defendant is the same height and build as the intruder seen in the videos.
Thank you, Ms. Galgano. You may stop screen sharing. Mr. Kozak, once the suspect entered the home, what happened?
Well, the victim was informed by the Ring security system that there was an intruder, and then he went to protect himself and his belongings by retrieving a knife from his kitchen knife block.
And what happened next?
Well, as earlier exhibits have shown, the victim and the perpetrator have engaged into a struggle. And the broken plate in Exhibit 9, as you saw, shows that they continued this struggle, moving away from the back door of the residence towards the kitchen.
And then what happened?
Well, the evidence suggests that the victim and the perpetrator continued in this struggle, but began moving towards the front door.
And what happened as a result?
Well, as you saw in both Exhibits 1 and 5, the victim was stabbed and left dead right before his front door while the perpetrator fled.
Do you know the cause of death?
I do, yes. Coach Brackman died from a stab wound that occurred during the struggle.
What overall conclusion did you make about the day of March 6, 2020?
My final overall conclusion of this tragic event is that it is the outcome of a burglary gone wrong.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Mr. Cusack. In your investigation, you believe that the victim was alerted of an intruder via the Ring Door app. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, you broke up. Could you repeat your question?
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Cusack. You believe that the victim was alerted of an intruder via the Ring doorbell app, correct?
Yes, I do believe that.
However, notifications can be turned off on this app.
That is possible, though it is unlikely.
But you never investigated whether or not the notifications were turned off.
No, I never did.
So you had no evidence to support your conclusion that the victim was alerted via the Ring doorbell app.
Well, the evidence present throughout the case pointed me towards these conclusions, along with the evidence present throughout the other investigators' reports.
Speaking of evidence, let's go back to exhibit.
Mr. Adams, I think you've cut out. Could you please repeat yourself? I don't know if I'm able to hear you. Can you try speaking?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, I'll repeat my question. Speaking of the evidence, let's go back to exhibit 9. That's the exhibit of the broken plate in the kitchen, correct?
That is correct, yes.
I'm sorry,
however,
Adams, your internet connection is pretty,
yes.
It's a struggle to hear you. It may help you to switch to phone audio.
Okay, I'll try that. We'll try that.
Mr. Adams, do you need assistance in how to switch over to phone audio, or are you okay?
Sure, that'd be helpful.
Okay, in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a microphone.
Yes.
Next to that is an up arrow. Click on that up arrow.
I see that.
And then when you do it, one of the options is switch to phone audio.
Have that.
Click on that, call one of those numbers, enter the meeting
From there.
ID, and then it will ask for your participant ID.
Okay. So do I hit done from there?
So when you click on switch to phone audio, there's a pop-up box that says choose one of the audio conference options.
I see.
And then just
Should
call
I
one of
dial
those numbers.
Okay.
And I'm going to mute you here so we don't hear your phone.
Okay.
And I believe it was about 9:02 when that started. So I just want to make sure that there was 16 minutes remaining left at that point. So there should still be 16 minutes remaining, excluding the time for tech support.
Okay. I think. Oh. Is it working now?
Yeah, I can hear you, Mr. Are you ready to proceed?
Yes, I am.
All right, so there should be 16 minutes remaining and you may proceed.
How much time is remaining?
16 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kuzak, you believe that the victim was stabbed with his own knife, correct?
Yes, I believe the knife, the murder weapon found at the scene was a Chicago cutlery knife from the drawer.
Correct.
Actually,
However, the knife's in Mr. Breckman's knife blocker of the more expensive J.A. Henkel's knife set, correct?
that is correct, but the victim's house had a large knife drawer, and it is clearly plausible that the murder weapon found could have just been a knife taken from this drawer and then inserted into the knife block to fit the missing gap for where one of these J.A. Henkel's knives may have been lost.
But you have no evidence to prove your conclusion that the victim was stabbed with his own knife, even though they're of completely different brands?
Well, the evidence throughout the case led me to this conclusion.
Let's move on to the scuff marks in Exhibit 18. You use those to prove that there's a struggle, correct?
Yes, I do.
However, there is no way of carbon dating scuff marks or finding when they got there.
No, there is not, but it is extremely plausible that these scuff marks were created during a struggle.
But it is possible that they could have been there before.
It is possible.
You also believe that the perpetrator was a similar height and build to the defendant, Avery Becker, correct?
Yes, you can determine this through the multiple video sequences found from the ring security system.
But in those videos, you cannot make out the gender of the perpetrator?
No, they are wearing full body clothing and coverings.
And
so
you
it would
cannot
be
make out
impossible.
the ethnicity of the perpetrator?
No, you cannot.
Well, that's the height and build of half the high school population in Colorado, isn't it?
I don't know the exact figures on that.
Let's move on to DNA evidence. You have no DNA evidence linking Avery Becker to the crime scene, do you?
Well, the perpetrator was wearing full body coverings, so it is a clear reason why no DNA evidence was found. And contrary to popular opinion, DNA evidence is not commonly found at all.
You've answered my question. Let's move on to the cast-off blood. You saw cast-off blood at the crime scene, correct?
Yes, I did find blood splatter throughout the crime scene.
And you used photos of that blood splatter in your investigation.
I did, but unfortunately they were corrupted.
So the jury didn't get to see those photos?
The jury did not, but I was able to see them and draw my conclusions from them.
But once again, the jury didn't get to see them to draw their own conclusions.
No, they did not. As I said, the files and the images were corrupted.
Finally, you would have preferred more physical evidence at the crime scene, isn't that correct?
I would have, but I was able to draw an accurate conclusion based on what was present.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Is there any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right. This witness may be excused. Prosecution, do you have any more witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Detective Markowitz to the stand.
You may proceed.
Good morning, Ms. Markowitz. I'm going to ask you a few questions. Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Jordan Markowitz.
What do you do for a living?
I've been a cop for 13 years and a detective for 7.
Were you involved in the investigation into the death of Mackenzie Brackman?
Yes, I was the lead investigator.
We'll come back and talk about your investigation later, but first, let's talk about your background. You mentioned you're a detective. Where do you work?
I work at the Denver Police Department as a homicide detective.
Do you have any specialized training?
Yes, I have specialized training in cell phones.
Could you explain exactly what that training is?
I've been certified by the American Academy of Law Enforcement. I took a 3-day training course and I passed the certification test.
Do you use your training in cell phone technology as a detective?
Yes, I use my training every day. I literally analyze the contents of thousands of cell phones, and I have also analyzed and interpreted cell phone data in over 50 cases.
At this time, the prosecution tenders Detective Markowitz as an expert in cell phone technology and cell tower data analysis.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
She will be admitted.
You mentioned being an expert in cell phone technology and cell phone tower analysis. How did your expertise help in this case?
I used my expertise to track Avery Becker's phone with the cell phone towers.
Did you come to any conclusions based off of this information?
Yes, I came to the conclusion that Miss Becker was on her way to Coach Brackman's home.
What led you to reach this conclusion?
I reached this conclusion because Miss Becker's phone was connected to several cell phone towers moving in the direction of Mr. Brackman's home.
Based on your further knowledge as an expert in cell phone data, could you explain to the court what CDRs are?
A CDR is a call detail record, and it basically means even when a phone is not in use, it is always trying to reach out and connect to cell phone towers.
Did these CDRs lead to any more conclusions about the case?
Yes, it led me to the conclusion that the defendant was at Coach Brackman's home the day of the murder.
Did you produce a map or graphic of your findings?
Yes, I did.
Would you recognize an exact copy of this map if it was shown to you?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to screen share Exhibit 15.
You may.
Ms. Galgano, could you please screen share Exhibit 15? What is this picture showing, Detective?
This picture shows the route that Avery Becker was taking the day of their murder. As you can see, this image shows she was headed in the direction of Coach Brackman's home, and that's why I believe that Avery Becker was on her way to Mr. Brackman's home to vandalize it.
Is this a fair and accurate picture of the cell phone tower map?
Yes.
Does it appear to have been changed or altered since you last saw it?
No.
At this time, the prosecution moves to admit Exhibit 15 as evidence.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 15 is admitted.
Your Honor, under Competition Rule 7.4, we would like to ask that the witness can mark this evidence electronically.
She may.
Could you mark this map to show this route to the jury?
Yes.
When and where was the first connection to the tower?
The first connection was here at Tower 1227-3 as I circled it in black, and it was at 12:47 in the afternoon.
And the next time?
The next tower was here at 1191-1 at 12:55 in the afternoon.
And the final time?
The final time was here at Tower 1197-1 at 1:05, 1:06, and 1:07 in the afternoon.
Just to clarify, were these text messages or phone calls?
These were both text messages and phone calls, all made from Taylor Perkins to the defendant's phone.
Could you summarize the route that the defendant took throughout this map?
Yes, as you can see here, this is where Avery Becker's home is, and here is where Mr. Brackman's home is. And I believe that Avery Becker took this route over along Rock Creek Parkway down to Mr. Brackman's home on the day of the murder.
Finally, based off of this evidence, do you have an opinion about the defendant at these times?
Yes.
What is that opinion exactly?
My opinion is that Avery Becker was at Mr. Brackman's home the day of the murder at the time of the murder.
Your Honor, permission to preserve the annotations that Ms. Markowitz made throughout this direct examination.
will be preserved.
No further questions.
Any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may proceed.
Good morning, Detective Markowitz. You were the one who downloaded the contents of Brackman's phone?
I'm sorry, I really didn't understand the question.
Miss Song, unfortunately, I can't hear you. You might be having a similar issue to what we had earlier. It may be quicker just to have you call in as well.
Hear me now?
I can, but you're choppy.
Okay, should I try and dial in by phone?
Yeah, I think that might be the easiest way to do it. For the record, time should be stopped right now while she does that. Do you know how to do that, Miss Song?
Miss Song, do you need assistance?
I believe so. So after you call the number, what do you do?
Okay, so you clicked on the switch to phone audio. So in the bottom left-hand corner, there's the microphone and a little up arrow.
Yeah.
And then click on that and then click on switch to phone audio. And then you call one of those numbers, probably the first one. And then it will ask you for the meeting ID and then the participant ID.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Long, can you try and see if we can hear you? You're going to want to keep your computer muted and then just use.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Are you ready to proceed?
I'm just wondering, how do you mute yourself?
If you look, move your cursor around and look down, you should see a little microphone button. If you press that button, it should mute yourself on the computer.
It actually automatically switched it over. She doesn't have to do anything.
Oh, okay, looks like we're good then. Are you ready to proceed with the song?
I believe so.
Yeah. All right, let's start the timer again.
Okay. So, Detective Markowitz, you were the one who downloaded the contents of Coach Mackenzie Brackman's phone?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, and on his phone you found the Ring doorbell footage?
Yes, and I was able to see the suspect through the Ring doorbell footage.
Yes. At this time, the trial technician will display Exhibit 12 onto the screen. I believe it has already been entered into evidence.
You may.
I think you're muted, Miss Song. No, I think you're still muted.
It says I'm unmuted.
No, you're
Is
unmuted.
it? Thank you. So there are no identifying features on the perpetrator, are there?
Well, you can tell the height and build of the perpetrator in this video.
Yes, and the height and build of the perpetrator is similar to many other people.
Yes, but there was also other evidence pointing towards Avery Becker being at this scene.
Right, but the height, so that means the height and build of the perpetrator is not an identifying feature?
It is an identifying feature.
But it's not specific to the person you're accusing?
No, it is. This height and build is specific to Avery Becker.
But you just said that it's the height and build of many other people?
No, ma'am, that was you saying that. Yes, height and build are similar to other people's, but this height and build was connected to Avery
I
Becker.
believe you. My question. So, and on the Ring doorbell system, after you found out about it, did you look at Mackenzie Brackman's notification settings?
No, I did not look at the notification settings.
So you assumed that he had the notifications on?
Yes, I assumed. With other people that I know that have the system have the notifications on.
So, but if you had looked, you wouldn't have had to assume. Is that correct?
Yes, if I would have looked, I wouldn't have had to assume, but I did assume, and that is under, yes, I did assume, but I believe that he had the notifications on.
Yes, okay, moving on. At this time, may my trial technician display Exhibit 14 onto the screen?
They may.
So Detective Markowitz, you described this as your biggest breakthrough, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And when Alex came in for the interview, Alex did not have her phone with him, is that correct?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate that she wasn't able to bring in her phone, but it's an easy mistake to make, especially when you're nervous to come talking to the police.
You said that it was unfortunate that Alex didn't bring their phone. So but you still didn't call Alex back to an interview with her phone. Is that correct?
No, because I thought the text messages were good enough for this case.
You thought an unverified piece of evidence was good enough for this case?
No, this was verified. I mean, the text messages were sent from Alex Fuentes.
They were sent from Alex Fuentes, but you never saw them in person?
No, I never saw them in person, but I believe the text messages were enough.
You never investigated the authenticity of these screenshots?
No, I had no reason to. I believed that these screenshots were real.
Thank you. Moving on. The blood splatter photos, they were corrupted. Is that correct?
Yes, but they showed no weight to this case. They weren't really important.
Yes, but they were evidence from the crime scene. Is that correct?
Objection.
Yes.
Can you restate your objection, please?
Relevance.
Response?
This is relevant to the case because it was involved in Detective Markowitz's investigation.
Any response to that?
Now, as Ms. Scheringer has described, these photos have no impact on specifically who is pinned as the murderer in this case.
Understood. The objection is overruled. You may proceed. Answer the question, please.
Yes, Your Honor. So the blood splatter photos were corrupted. Is that correct?
Yes, but they had no impact on the case.
Yes, and they were evidence nevertheless. Is that correct?
Yes, they were still evidence.
Yes, and you did not bother to copy those photographs?
No, like I said before, they showed no weight to the case.
You knew that they could be corrupted?
Yes, they were corrupted.
Yes, and yet you did not bother to copy them to prevent corruption?
No, as I've said, they showed no weight.
Yes, thank you. You've answered my question. And moving on, you know that Blair Rollins is seen as an alternate suspect?
Yes, I have seen that.
Yes, but yet you didn't investigate Blair Rollins?
I never said that. I just did not say that I investigated him in my affidavit.
You realized that you were supposed to update your affidavit?
Well, as I said, I believed that Avery Becker was the primary suspect in this case, and that's why I included Avery Becker as my main suspect in this case.
So did you investigate Blair Rollins or not?
I did.
You did, but yet you didn't put it in your affidavit?
No, because I thought it did not needed to be added in there.
Thank you. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
A very brief one, Your Honor.
Okay, you may proceed.
Now, just to clarify, Ms. Scheringer or Ms. Markowitz, did the loss of any of the blood spatter photos or the investigation into Blair Rollins make any difference into the final conclusion in your case?
No, I still believe that Avery Becker was the suspect in this case, the main suspect in this case.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any recross based on that questioning?
Yes, Your Honor, a brief one.
Okay.
May
You may.
Oh, yes. Detective Markowitz, so you do realize that you were supposed to update your affidavit to include all of your investigation? Or, yeah, is that correct?
Well, I believe that my investigation into Blair Rollins was not important, and it was important, but it was not needed in this case because I believe that the main suspect was Avery Becker.
You didn't bother to put an alternate suspect in your affidavit?
No, I did not, because the evidence was pointing towards Avery Becker.
Thank you. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
All right, this witness may be excused. Does the prosecution wish to call any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor, the prosecution rests.
All right. I believe we now turn to the defense. Does the defense wish to call any witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, who's your first witness?
The defense calls Professor Blake Van Owen to the stand.
Okay, you may proceed.
Yes. So, Professor Blake Van Owen, please state your name and spell your last for the record.
Blake Van Owen, VAN space OWEN.
Now, Professor Van Owen, what is your occupation?
I'm a private investigator that specializes in police practices, use of force, false arrest, and forensic evidence techniques.
I've heard that you're also a professor. What qualifications do you have that led you to be able to be a professor?
I have a master's degree in criminal justice.
Yes, and what classes do you teach as a professor?
I teach a class on police practices and social justice.
And in your private investigation, what fields of knowledge do you use?
Well, I have expertise in crime scene reconstruction, cell tower analysis, and general police investigation tactics.
How many times have you testified in court?
I've consulted on more than 100 cases, and I have testified as an expert in crime scene reconstruction 8 times, cell tower analysis 5 times, and general police investigation tactics 12 times.
Have you ever been accepted as an expert witness in other states?
Yes, I've been accepted as an expert witness in the state courts of Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, and New Mexico.
At this time, Your Honor, the defense moves to enter Professor Blake Van Owen as an expert witness in general police investigation tactics, police practices, forensic evidence techniques, crime scene reconstruction, and cell tower analysis.
Any objection?
Yes, I object only to him being constituted as an expert in cell tower analysis.
Any response? Ms. Song, you're muted.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I can lay more foundation, Your Honor.
If you'd like to lay more foundation, you can.
So, Professor Van Owen, do you use cell tower analysis in your investigation? Professor Van Owen, I believe you've cut out.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. Did you hear my question?
No, I did not. Can you please repeat it?
Yes, of course. So, Professor Van Owen, do you use cell tower analysis in your investigation?
Yes, I do. I've used it many times.
Have you used cell tower analysis in your previous investigation?
Yes, and I have testified in court as an expert in cell tower analysis 5 times.
Ms. Song, you're muted again.
Sorry. At this time, the defense again moves to enter Professor Blake Van Owen as an expert in all of the fields that I mentioned previously and cell tower analysis.
Is there an objection?
Yes, I still object to cell tower analysis specifically.
I think that there's been a foundation laid for the witness to testify as an expert. So I'll admit.
Yes, Your Honor. So, Professor Van Owen, how do you think the prosecution handled this case?
It was a rushed investigation from top to bottom. They accepted text messages that could easily have been doctored. They lost blood splatter photos crucial to understanding how the murder played out. And they did not investigate an alternate suspect, Blair Rollins.
Yes. So, you mentioned the blood splatters. Would any competent police department one copy of photos from the crime scene?
No, if evidence is in...
Professor Van Owen, I believe you've cut out. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Mr. Zimian, we can't hear you. Can you try saying something, please?
Yes.
Okay, it sounds like you're back.
Yes.
Question?
Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Yes. So, would any competent police department only keep one copy of crime scene photos?
No, if evidence is important, you would make multiple copies to make sure you have it on the day of the trial.
And what does them only keeping one copy say about their investigation?
Well, it further illustrates that it was rushed.
Thank you. Now, at this time, allow me to direct your attention to Exhibit 22. May we have permission to display Exhibit 22 on the screen?
Yeah.
Yes, Your Honor.
Last thing I do.
Did anyone hear that? Or is it just me? Okay.
You can replay it.
I'll get you back, Brackman, if it's the last thing I do.
Okay. Did you guys hear that this time?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Of course. So, Professor Van Owen, do you recognize Exhibit 22?
Yes, it's an audio recording from a court proceeding involving Jonathan Rollins, Blair Rollins' father.
And how does this exhibit relate to the case?
It gives a possible motive to the alternate suspect I mentioned, Blair Rollins.
And is this a fair and accurate copy of what you investigated?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense moves to enter Exhibit 22 into evidence. Its authenticity is stipulated.
Any objection other than authenticity?
No objections, Your Honor.
The exhibit will be admitted.
So, Professor Blake Van Owen, can you tell me more about the alternate suspect, Blair Rollins?
Blair Rollins is another student at CHS, and he was absent from school on the day of the murder, which gives him a likelihood that he could have committed the murder.
Can you tell me more about Blair's potential motive?
Yes, so Brackman was the attorney defending his father in this case, and try as he might, Brackman was unable to do anything, and Jonathan Rollins was sentenced to life in prison. So, therefore, Blair Rollins may have a grudge against Brackman for not helping his dad in the court proceeding.
Can you compare Blair's motive to Avery Becker's potential motive?
Well, Blair's motive is much stronger. Avery Becker has this little insignificant quarrel with Brackman, and Blair's dad is in life in prison.
Yes. And how did the prosecution handle Blair Rollins?
They completely ignored him, despite his strong motive and no alibi.
And what does that say about the prosecution?
Well, it says what I've been saying all along. Their investigation was completely rushed.
And lastly, about Blair Rollins, what happened to Blair after the 2019 to 2020 school year?
He seems to have disappeared. I looked around and I cannot find him anywhere.
Objection, lack of foundation.
Response?
I believe enough foundation has been laid. Professor Van Owen has investigated Blair Rollins.
I think you may lay a little more foundation about what he's done to investigate.
Of course, Your Honor. So, Professor Van Owen, did you look into Blair Rollins?
Yes, I did, very thoroughly.
And did you look at his records from the day of the murder and afterwards?
Yes, I looked at his public records and I could not find his whereabouts after the 2020 school year.
Your Honor, is that enough foundation?
That is. The objection is overruled.
Yes, Your Honor. So, Professor Van Owen, moving on, do you write anything about this case?
Yes, I wrote an expert report containing my opinions on this case.
And if I showed you that report, would you be able to recognize it?
Yes, I would.
At this time, the trial technician will display Exhibit 20 onto the screen.
They may.
So, Professor Van Owen, did you write this report?
Yes, I did.
And without going too much into detail, how does this relate to the case?
Well, it illustrates my opinions on the case, including my theory on how the victim was stabbed and my theories on the cell tower data as well.
Yes, and is this a fair and accurate representation of what you have written?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense moves to enter Exhibit 20 into evidence.
Any objection?
Objections, Your Honor.
That was no objections, counsel?
Yes, no objections.
Okay, the exhibit is admitted.
Yes. So, Professor Van Owen, can you tell me a little about the...
I'm sorry, I lost you.
Oh, of course. Would you like me to repeat my question?
Yes, please.
Can you tell me about the knife, or specifically the prosecution's analysis of the knife?
Yes, so the prosecution states that Brackman was stabbed during a struggle, which is completely wrong. First off, Avery Becker would have had, or sorry, not Avery Becker, the perpetrator would have had to been much bigger than Brackman to stab him in this manner. Therefore, I believe that Brackman was stabbed in a seated position from behind, as illustrated with the knife grip illustrated in the photo in my report.
And why do you believe the prosecution's analysis to be unlikely?
Well, because for one, Brackman, or the perpetrator, would have had to been much bigger than Brackman to stab him in this manner. And also, they say that the knife was from Brackman's knife block, but it was not, because obviously it's a different brand. So my theory is that the perpetrator brought the knife onto the scene.
And why would the perpetrator have had to be a lot bigger than Brackman in order to stab them in the way that the prosecution has hypothesized?
To reach around someone and stab them that deep, nicking their aorta, you would have to have extremely long arms and also to be taller than them to be able to reach around them in this manner.
Thank you. At this time, my trial technician will display Exhibit 21 on screen.
They may.
Now, Professor Van Owen, did you take any photographs during your investigation?
Yes, I did.
Is this one of the photographs which you took?
Yes, it is.
Now, what does Exhibit 21 display?
Exhibit 21 displays the knife grip that was likely used during the murder.
Is this a fair and accurate representation of the photograph which you took?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense moves to enter Exhibit 21 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, relevance.
Any response?
This is extremely relevant to the case because it illustrates the manner in which Professor Blake Van Owen has hypothesized that the victim was stabbed.
Any reply?
Now, the way in which the victim was killed does not alter any of the elements needed to constitute the crime charged, and thereby does not alter the charges of first-degree felony murder and second-degree burglary.
Thank you, counsel. I'm going to find that it's relevant because if you can make different inferences based on different theories of how the murder occurred, then that is fair game and he will be subject to cross-examination. Objection overruled.
Yes, Your Honor. And so, Professor Blake Van Owen, why do you believe that the knife was held in this manner?
Well, this is a comfortable grip shown, as the knife at the center of this case is made to be held in a certain way. It feels comfortable if held that way, and of equal importance, feels uncomfortable if held the other way. So therefore, I think that the perpetrator would have most likely held the knife in this manner.
Yes. So moving on, did you do any investigation about the cell towers?
Yes, I did.
So the prosecution has a hypothesis. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, they used the cell tower data to place Avery Becker at the scene of the crime. However, it does not do that.
And why not?
Cell tower data is not remotely like GPS data. All you can tell from using information from a single cell tower is that the phone in question was somewhere within 6 miles of the tower and on a 120-degree arc relative to the tower.
And what does the defendant say about their phone?
The defendant says that they did not have their phone on the day of the murder. So therefore, even if you could use the cell towers to place Avery's phone at the scene of the murder, it does not place Avery at the scene of the murder.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Van Owen. I'm going to ask you a few questions. First, let's start with your background. You only testify for the defense, isn't that correct?
Yeah, I do that because most prosecutors use police personnel who cost them nothing. Why pay an independent expert when you can get police for free?
You're being paid between $6,000 and $10,000 for your testimony today, correct?
Yes, that is correct. I got to make a living.
You were a cop for the Aurora Police Department.
Yes, for a 9-month period.
You injured a woman of color during her arrest, correct?
Yes, the technique I used had been completely improved, but I still feel great remorse for my actions.
But she sued you, correct?
Yes, she did.
And you settled with her?
Yes. I would like to tell you what the settlement was, but I'm precluded from doing so by a confidentiality agreement.
Perfectly fine. You left the department following this incident, correct?
Yes, I did. I was so disgusted by the police tactics that I wanted to leave immediately.
And that's exactly why you consider yourself a check on the power of the police.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about the prosecution's investigation. You agree that the evidence shows someone breaking into Mackenzie Brackman's home?
Yes, I do.
But you don't think there's evidence of a struggle?
I do not think the evidence supports a struggle, no.
You are aware there were scuff marks on the floor?
Yes, I do. Those scuff marks could have been made at any time, though. You cannot carbon date scuff marks. And also, in Exhibit 12, we see the perpetrator entering the back door, but you can see through the glass, and there is no struggle occurring there, which is where the scuff marks are.
You're getting a bit ahead of me. However, these scuff marks could indicate a struggle.
Probably not, though, because we saw in the video that there was no struggle near the back door.
Before the victim broke into the home?
Why would there be a struggle inside the home before the victim was inside the home? Or before...
Exactly. Moving on. You're also aware that the police found a broken plate on the ground near the kitchen?
Yes, I am.
And an overturned chair?
Yes.
You criticized the police for losing pictures of the crime scene?
Yes, I did.
However, these pictures would not have mattered anyway, would they?
No, they would have. They would have been able to shed light on how the murder occurred and therefore how the knife got there.
However, they would not have shed light on who killed the victim.
No, by making inferences from how the knife got there, you could make more probable and less probable suspects.
So you signed a witness statement before this, correct?
Yes, I did.
And would you recognize it if I screen shared it today?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, permission to screen share Mr. Blake Van Owen's witness statement?
You may.
Now, I'd like to direct your attention to line 204.
I cannot see it on the screen. It's very blurry.
I apologize. Is there any way to enlarge it, Ms. Galgano?
Okay, I can see it now. Thank you.
No, you can't see line 204.
No, not right now. It did come into focus for a second, but then she scrolled and it blurred again.
So you are not able to read line 204?
No, I'm not. I do have a copy of my affidavit with me, though. Oh, now I can. That worked.
Now, if I may, I can read it out for you.
Okay.
Now, line 204 states, the missing photos would not have shed light on who killed Mackenzie Brackman. That is what you stated in your witness statement, isn't it?
Yes.
Ms. Galgano, could you please scroll down to the very end of the witness statement displaying Blake Van Owen's signature? Now, Mr. Van Owen, this is your signature, correct?
Yes, it is.
And before this trial, you swore to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
That is all. There are further questions, but I'm proceeding. Finally, you are aware that Avery Becker was absent from school on the day of the murder?
Yes, I am.
Let's look at your personal investigation of this case. You know that you could have obtained cell tower records of Taylor Perkins for the day of the murder?
Yes, I could have.
You think that it is possible that those records could have supported Avery Becker's alibi?
Yes, it's possible.
But you did not collect that vital piece of information for the case.
No, I thought it better to rely on the prosecution's failure to obtain their burden of proof.
Now, the cell phone tower near Brackman's house placed at least Avery Becker's phone near the scene of the crime.
Yes, it did.
No further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, briefly, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
So, Professor Van Owen, what about the police department made you leave?
Well, the police tactics were completely out of hand. They approved a tactic that had injured a young woman.
And what did you mean by shedding light on who killed Brackman?
Well, I did not mean that it would give you exactly who killed Brackman, but understanding how the murder occurred is also important to the case.
Thank you. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
All right. Any recross based on that questioning?
No, Your Honor.
All right, this witness may be excused. Defense counsel, do you have any further witnesses? Mr. Adams, I think you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Do you have any other witnesses to call, Mr. Adams?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Taylor Perkins to the stand.
Okay, you may proceed.
Good morning, Ms. Perkins. Please state your full name and spell your last for the jury.
Taylor Perkins, Perkins.
How do you know the defendant, Avery Becker?
Avery Becker is my best friend. We did mock trial together. She's actually the one who convinced me to join.
And how do you know the victim, Mackenzie Brackman?
He was our mock trial coach at Colorado High School.
How often did you speak with Avery Becker?
Frequently. We're really close.
And how often was mock trial practice?
At least once a week, if not more.
Did Avery and Mr. Brackman ever get in any sort of feuds at mock trial practice?
They had a kind of ongoing feud. I found it actually pretty funny and didn't care to get involved. There was one day in particular that I thought really showed their feud. About a month before regionals, Avery showed up to practice the most unprepared she ever had. She still performed amazing, but Coach Brackman got really mad at her and demoted her from the A team to the B team.
And what did you do after hearing that Avery had been demoted?
I quit the team. I was only really doing it to spend time with friends, specifically Avery. And since I wouldn't be doing that, it really made no sense for me to continue being on the team. It also meant a lot more to Avery than it did for me, so it was an easy decision.
Based on your experience with both Avery and Mr. Brackman, how would you describe the relationship between the two?
They had a pretty tense relationship, but I wouldn't say they hated each other. They just disagreed on work ethic.
Let's move on to the night of March 5th. Were you with Avery?
Yes, I was with her the whole day.
And what did the two do?
We played at my house on our phones for a while until we got hungry. And that's when we decided to go to the Fry Shack, which in retrospect probably wasn't the best idea. And then after that, we went to the mall.
So what happened at the Fry Shack?
The whole entire mock trial team was there, as that was a tradition to go there after practice. And everyone was telling Avery how unfair it was that Brackman kicked her off the team, even Alex, which it almost seemed sincere, but he was at times passive aggressive. So it upset Avery and she stormed off, leaving her phone on the table, which was really unlike her as she was really attached to it. It was kind of like her third kidney. And that was the last time I had seen her phone.
Let's move on to the following day, March 6th. Were you with Avery?
Yes, she picked me up from my house, as she usually did when we both had first period off. And that's when we both realized her phone was missing. So we decided to skip school since we had no really reason to go. And we decided to go look for her phone, and we retraced our steps, ending at the Fry Shack in the afternoon to see if the afternoon staff might have seen her phone.
And were you with Avery Becker the entire day?
Yes, I was.
And were you with Avery Becker particularly during the time of Mr. Brackman's murder from 12:45 p.m. to 1:15 p.m.?
Yes, we were together the whole entire day.
And where was Avery's phone located that day?
We don't know. We actually never found it.
And so Avery was not with her phone?
No, she was not.
Do you know the student Alex Fuentes?
Yes, he was. She was on the mock trial team with Avery and I.
Lack of foundation.
I'm sorry, counsel, one moment. Was there an objection?
Yeah, lack of foundation.
Any response?
I'll lay more foundation, Your Honor.
Okay. You may proceed.
One moment, Your Honor. Were there any, could you describe another student on the mock trial team for me?
Yes, there is another mock trial student named Alex, and there was a bit of a rivalry between her and Avery as they were both competing for spots.
So Avery knew who Alex Fuentes was?
Yes, she did.
And were Avery and Alex friends?
Not really. They were teammates, so they had to get along at times, but I wouldn't call them friends.
Finally, do you know the student Blair Rollins?
Yes, he was a student at Colorado High School with us.
And how is Blair Rollins connected to Mackenzie Brackman?
His Brackman was he was on the case that sent Blair Rollins' dad to prison.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Okay, cross-examination.
You are a Colorado High School alumni, yes?
Yes.
And you participated in the mock trial there?
Yes, I did.
You're friends with the defendant?
Yes, best friends, in fact.
And you only joined because the defendant had joined?
Yes, to spend more time with her.
On the day of the murder, you claim you were with the defendant?
I was, the whole entire day.
But no one can verify that, right?
No.
No one in this courtroom could verify this?
No. Well, except Avery, because she was with me.
As you had already stated, you were on the mock trial. Mackenzie Brackman was your coach?
Yes, he was.
Avery and the coach would often get into little feuds.
Yes, that's true.
And these feuds would bother Avery, maybe enough to even prank the coach?
Yes, a couple times, yes.
And you thought that the defendant could be rash and had an inflated ego?
At times, but I wouldn't say she was rash enough. She was only at times, and it wasn't that extended.
The defendant would often get upset with the coach?
Yes, he hurt her feelings at times, or her ego, as he always put her down.
He would call her lazy and unprepared?
Yes.
A month before regionals, Avery went to practice completely unprepared, is that correct?
Yes, she did.
You thought that this made the coach mad?
Yes, it did.
And as a result, Avery was demoted to Team B, right?
Yes.
And you stepped down so Avery could take your spot?
That was part of the reason, but yeah, partially, yes.
The defendant told you that the coach said she had not deserved the award she had gotten.
Yes, he said that she didn't put enough effort in.
The comment made Avery very upset.
Yeah, it kind of took the joy out of the winning the awards.
The defendant had also told you that she wrote worst attorney award on the hood of the Porsche of Mr. Brackman, no?
Yes, she at first thought it was dry erase.
After this, the coach decided to kick Avery off the team, right?
Yes.
Avery tried everything to get back on.
Yeah.
But Brackman still said no.
Yes.
As a last effort, Avery showed up to a Thursday practice the day before Coach Brackman was murdered, right?
Yeah.
But she was told to leave.
Yes. And then she came to my house.
All right, now I'd like to talk a little bit about her phone. From what you saw, the defendant always had her phone on her.
Yes, most of the time.
It was like a third kidney, you'd say?
Yes.
She wouldn't go anywhere without it.
Yes.
The defendant had her phone with her at the Fry Shack?
Yes, that's the last time we saw it.
So the morning after is when you noticed the phone had disappeared?
Yes.
So you and the defendant ditched school on March 6th to look for the phone?
Yes.
It was only you and the defendant?
Yes.
So other than your best friend Avery, no one could attest to this?
No.
And the defendant's phone was an iPhone?
Yes, it was.
Were you aware that you could track iPhones using the Find My iPhone program?
Well, we at the time didn't think of that as I have an Android, so we would have to go, it was harder to do.
So you made no effort to use the Find My iPhone tracking?
No, we instead tried what we thought of, which was calling her phone.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any redirect based on that? And Mr. Adams, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. Nope. Nope.
I think I'm gonna have to can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
You can.
Yes, I have a brief redirect, Your Honor.
Okay.
Ms. Perkins, could you reiterate why you stepped down from the mock trial team?
I had no reason to be on the team anymore since I wouldn't be spending time with Avery, and I didn't want to become a lawyer, so it really made no sense for me to stay on the team.
And finally, the prosecution is accusing you of lying about your location on March 6th. How do you feel about that?
I think it's absurd. I would never lie in court or for anyone.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any recross based on that questioning?
No, Your Honor.
All right, this witness may be excused. Defense counsel, do you have any further witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense now calls Avery Becker to the stand.
All right, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Could you, Ms. Becker, please state your first and last name and spell it for the court?
Hello, my name is Avery Becker, Averybecker.
You attended Colorado High School last year. Or no, I'm sorry, what high school did you attend last year?
The Colorado High School.
Did you participate in any extracurricular activities there?
I did. I was a part of mock trial.
How would you describe your skills in mock trial?
Well, I was very good at just making it up on the fly. I didn't really need to prepare all that much because it was just more natural.
Ms. Becker, I think you cut out for the end of your response for me. I'm not sure about others, but could you repeat your response?
Me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
All right, can you please repeat the question?
Yes, I'll repeat the question. How would you describe your skills in mock trial?
Well, I was just good at making it up on the fly. Honestly, I really enjoyed it. I got a lot of awards for it, so that sure says something.
Tell us about your relationship with Coach Brackman.
Well, we both had very different work ethics. We got on each other's nerves a few times, a few feuds, just because he really just didn't agree with how I did things.
How did he react to you winning the Best Attorney Award?
He got up all in my face about it. He said that I didn't deserve it, and I was really excited when I won those awards, so it really just blew me off.
Court statement.
What was the objection?
Hearsay using an out-of-court statement.
Response?
Response. Wait. Yeah. Okay. The response would be an excited utterance, as Mr. Brackman was not happy at this time, and was an excited utterance as his anger was coming out at Miss Becker.
Response to that?
This is once again an out-of-court statement, and the person who's being said obviously is not in this court statement courtroom right now, therefore it should not be used.
I will respectfully overrule the objection and admit it as an excited utterance. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Tell us about the incident where you were kicked off the team.
Well, it was the Tuesday night practice after winning those awards, and he started insulting me, saying that I really just got it due to my good looks, and I was really upset about it, so I stormed out of practice.
How did you feel about this accident?
Well, he kept insulting me. I mean, how would anyone feel? It hurt a lot, and I mean, it wasn't fair.
Please describe your relationship with Alex Fuentes.
We were never really close. I mean, we're both on the mock trial team, so obviously we had to get along to some sorts, but we never really hanged out, and you could kind of just tell that he was jealous of me. Or she.
Objection, lack of personal knowledge. How does Ms. Becker know what Ms. Fuentes was feeling or thinking?
Response?
My response would be that her own relationship with Alex Fuentes is like she knows how she feels about Alex and how that they relate with each other, how they talk with each other, and relate with each other at school and at other activities.
I will respectfully overrule the objection, and prosecution can cross-examine on that subject if they'd like.
All right. On March 5th, what did you do after being kicked off the mock trial team?
Well, the previous day I had a dry erase marker and I wrote on the hood, Worst Attorney Award. I found out later that it was a permanent marker. So on March 5th, I was really upset about it, and I tried to apologize several times, trying to go up to him and texting him that I would get a job and try and pay the money for the new paint, and there was just really nothing I could do. He wouldn't see me or talk to me.
Did you go anywhere after you were kicked off the mock trial team?
Yes, I went to Taylor Perkins' house for a while, and then we went to the Fry Shack.
Did anything of note happen there?
Well, several people from our mock trial team were at the Fry Shack, and several of them started to apologize to me, including Alex Fuentes. But I mean, it sounded insincere, and it made me upset.
Did anything happen to your phone?
Well, Taylor Perkins and we were playing on our phones at the Fry Shack, and after I got upset with everyone just trying to apologize to me, I woke up the next day and found it missing.
When did you? Oh, I'm sorry. On March 6th, what did you do to find it?
Well, I picked up Taylor Perkins, and we decided to skip school as none of our classes really we already knew what our classes were about, and so we went to the mall and to the Fry Shack to look for the phone.
Did you manage to find or locate your phone ever
No.
since?
Sorry. No, to this day, I don't know where my phone is.
Are you familiar with Blair Rollins?
I am.
How would you describe the relationship between Blair Rollins and Alex Fuentes?
Well,
lack of personal knowledge and speculation.
Response?
Your Honor, I believe that I have set the foundation for her knowledge of both Blair Rollins, as she's familiar with her, as well as having a relationship with Alex Fuentes.
The witness can testify to what she personally knows. So overruled for now.
I'll ask again. How would you describe the relationship between Blair Rollins and Alex Fuentes?
I knew that they were friends. I'd seen each other often. I mean, I knew that they were closes.
And finally, is my last question for you. Are you familiar with any times that Blair Rollins acted strangely?
Well, I know that he is, I hate to say it, stereotypically the weird kid at our school. His father was sent to jail by Mackenzie Brackman for life.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions at this time.
Okay, any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, proceed.
Ms. Becker, to start off, you were at school the day of Mr. Brackman's death, correct?
Well, I was not at school the day of his death.
And you would say you and Mr. Brackman butted heads quite often, correct?
I mean, we had misunderstandings and disagreements.
Yes, you did have these disagreements, but you also believed that Mr. Brackman hated you due to your natural talent, right?
I believe that he hated my work ethic, and I believe that hated can be, can result in many speculations.
And once Mr. Brackman called you lazy due to this work ethic, right?
Yes.
Which caused an argument about a month before regionals, right?
Well, yes.
And in that argument, you were moved to the B team, correct?
That is correct.
In your words, you believed the B team was full of losers, right?
Well, there is a reason that they aren't on the A team. The only reason why they were good at what they did is because they followed Mr. Brackman's scripts.
And you attempted to get back on the A team, but that didn't work by yourself, correct?
Well, yes, I was a senior and I had worked hard, or I wanted to be on the A team. I deserved that role.
In fact, you weren't able to go back to the A team until your friend, Taylor Perkins, had quit, correct?
Well, she quit because she knew how much I wanted to be on there, so yes.
And moving a little forward in time, at the practice after regionals, you and Mr. Brackman got into yet another disagreement, correct?
That is correct.
During that disagreement, Mr. Brackman had told you you didn't deserve the award you had won. Isn't that right?
That is correct.
That angered you, right?
Well, of course. Who wouldn't be angered by someone constantly insulting them for something that you deserved?
And that night, you stormed out of the classroom, correct?
Yes, I didn't want to keep being insulted. He was very unprofessional about it.
With you, you had a marker in your hand, correct?
Yes.
And with that marker, you wrote over Mr. Brackman's beloved Porsche Worst Attorney Award, correct?
I had believed that it was a dry erase marker and believed that it would wash right off.
Miss Becker, I'm not asking about what the marker was. I am asking, did you write that on his car?
I did.
And that night you had went home and told your mother that Mr. Brackman had gotten onto you for no good reason, though, correct?
Yes.
But you thought it was important to leave out the fact that you vandalized Mr. Brackman's car, correct?
Yes.
And that same night, during that same discussion, you had told your mother you would get back at Mr. Brackman, even if it was the last thing you did, right?
Well, I mean, yes, I did, but in blunt terms, I was upset, and then she called me down, and I realized that, well, that I misspoke.
But Miss Becker, you did say those words that night, correct?
I did.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Miss Becker, or do I have time? Oh, never mind. I do not have I'm out of time, Your Honor.
This witness may then be excused. Does the defense have any further witnesses?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
All right. I think at this point then we are prepared to move to closing arguments. We will begin with the prosecution. Would you like to make a closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor, and we do ask that all remaining time from my argument be left for rebuttal.
Okay, we will reserve remaining time for rebuttal.
Thank you. Desperation, location, confrontation. Members of the jury today, the defendant was desperate to get back at Mr. Brackman after he destroyed her mock trial career. Miss Becker was at Mr. Brackman's home the day of his death, confronting Mr. Brackman in her own ways, which ended with a high school mock trial coach dead on his own floor. Desperation, location, confrontation. Today, Avery Becker is being charged with first-degree murder and second-degree burglary. The prosecution has the duty to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant knowingly, intentionally, and unlawfully entered Mr. Brackman's home, and while there, Mr. Brackman was killed. We have proven today that this case is a burglary gone wrong. Desperation. Today, you heard from Alex Fuentes, a next classmate and teammate of Miss Becker. Miss Fuentes described how desperate Miss Becker was to get back at Mr. Brackman, even if it was the last thing she did. Miss Fuentes today displayed to you Exhibit 14, a copy of messages between her and the defendant. In these messages, the defendant directly says, if he's mad about what I did to his house, he'll be mad about what I'll do to his house. I'm going to wait until he's at work and break in and trash it. That'll show him. Location. Now, the day of Mr. Brackman's death was a school day, the same school day the defendant was absent from. Today, you heard from Detective Markowitz, who provided Exhibit 15, the cell phone data. This cell phone data showed Miss Becker traveling from her own home to Mr. Brackman's home on March 6th, 2020, the day of Brackman's death. Confrontation. Miss Becker's verbal confrontations with Mr. Brackman didn't satisfy her. So she went on to more physical tactics, specifically vandalism. Vandalism of Mackenzie Brackman's car after being in an argument in front of the team, and vandalism of his own home after being removed from the team overall. Finally, today you heard from Kyle Kuzak, who investigated the crime scene. Kyle Kuzak showed you the home ring videos from Mr. Brackman's home. In these videos, it showed someone of the same height and build illegally entering Mr. Brackman's home through the back door and illegally leaving through the front. Desperation, location, confrontation. We have proven today that the defendant was desperate to get back at Mr. Brackman and went to confront Mr. Brackman at his own home. Although Ms. Becker went to Mr. Brackman's home to trash it, but she ended Mr. Brackman's life in that moment. Members of the jury, we ask you to return the verdict of guilty. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would the defense like to give a closing statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel, my name is Reed Benfield, representing the defendant in this case, alongside my co-counsel, Ming Song and Tony Adams. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is a great example of rushed investigations. First, when justifying if Avery Becker was at the scene of the crime, conclusions were rushed. Second, when evidence went missing, conclusions were rushed. And third, when text messages were never directly inspected, conclusions were rushed. Throughout this case, the evidence thoroughly and clearly points to the fact that Avery Becker is innocent of all charges being pressed against her, and furthermore, the evidence used by the prosecution is incomplete. The evidence has shown beyond a reasonable doubt that Avery Becker was not the murderer of Mr. Brackman. In order to be convicted of murder in the first degree, as well as second-degree burglary of a dwelling, Avery Becker must have knowingly, feloniously, and unlawfully broken entrance into the residence of Mackenzie Brackman, and during the furtherance of this crime, second-degree burglary also occurred. The death of Mackenzie Brackman was caused by anyone. The prosecution has not properly fulfilled the requirements necessary to convict Ms. Becker of murder in the first degree, nor second-degree burglary of a dwelling. For the duration of this trial, we have learned that Avery Becker did not commit any crime on the day of March 6, 2020, through the testimonies of Professor Van Owen, Taylor Perkins, and Avery Becker. First, Professor Van Owen took the stand to explain his take on the case. He cast doubt upon the investigations of Kyle Kuzak, as well as the techniques of Detective Markowitz. He also explained that this case contained a multitude of rushed conclusions. One of these being the police losing important photographs of the crime scene, as well as Detective Markowitz never directly inspecting the text messages sent from Avery Becker to Alex Fuentes. He also shines light on the fact that Blair Rollins is another possible convict of this case that went unidentified and uninvestigated. He says that Blair Rollins has the exact same build and body shape as Avery Becker, and the ring videos just could have easily been Blair Rollins as Avery Becker. Next, we heard from Taylor Perkins, who further proved the innocence of my client. Taylor Perkins explained that Avery Becker was looking for her phone all day on the day of March 6, 2020, and that they were nowhere near the residence of Mackenzie Brackman. She also shines light on the bad relationship between Alex Fuentes and Avery Becker. Finally, we heard from the defendant herself, Avery Becker, who proved her own innocence. She explained that she did not have her phone on the day of March 6, 2020, the day of the murder, and that in fact, she lost it after meeting with Alex Fuentes at the Fry Shack. Additionally, she explains that she has never been friends with Alex Fuentes in their entire high school career, and that Alex Fuentes has in fact been friends with Blair Rollins, the strange kid at the school that would be just the kind to commit a murder like this one. The prosecution must, beyond a reasonable doubt, prove that Avery Becker killed Mr. Brackman on March 6, 2020. They have not proved that Avery is guilty of any charges being pressed against her because she was not at the scene of the crime, nor was associated with it when it occurred. For these reasons, Avery Becker is innocent of murder in the first degree as well as second degree burglary of a dwelling. And at the end of this trial, we ask you to return a verdict in favor of Avery Becker. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Broomfield had just stood up and tried to claim that our conclusions were rushed, when in reality, our conclusions were handed to us through our evidence. Members of the jury, we have shown and proven to you that Miss Becker threatened to go to Mr. Brackman's home through those text messages. And we have proven that Mr. Becker was at Mr. Brackman's home the day of his death through the cell phone data of her traveling from her home to Mr. Brackman's home, and from the home ring videos of someone the same height and build entering Mr. Brackman's home and leaving it. Members of the jury, we ask you to return an easily handed to you verdict of guilty. Thank you.
All right, I think that concludes this trial.